The rain had arrived uninvited, soaking the cobblestone streets of the sleepy little town of Willow Creek, but to Evelyn Hart it felt oddly fitting. Her umbrella had given up halfway through the walk, leaving her curls clinging to her cheeks, and her suede boots damp. She pulled her coat tighter as she approached the cozy corner bookstore, the same one her grandmother used to bring her to every summer as a child. After years away building a career in New York, she had finally returned to this quiet town for a break from everything, from noise, from pressure, from pretending to be okay. The moment she stepped inside the shop, a wave of warmth hit her both from the heater and the scent of aged paper, pine-scented candles, and something else she couldn't place. Comfort. That's what it smelled like. A kind of forgotten peace. Behind the counter stood a man with rolled-up sleeves, reading a paperback with such focus he didn't notice her entrance. Evelyn blinked a few times, unsure if the dim glow from the fairy lights hanging overhead was playing tricks on her. He looked familiar, strikingly so. And he looked up. And everything stopped. He blinked in disbelief, the book falling from his hands onto the counter with a soft thud. "Evelyn?" he said, half whispering her name like he was scared she might vanish. It took her a second longer, but then the recognition swept over her like a tide. Noah Blake, her best friend from high school. The boy with crooked smiles and silent strength. The one who had held her hand the night her parents told her they were divorcing. The one who had stood at the edge of the platform when she boarded a bus for New York 7 years ago, saying nothing but holding her gaze until the very last second. Her voice wavered. "It's really you." A soft chuckle escaped his lips, filled with disbelief. "I thought you'd forgotten about this place." "I could never forget," she said, her heart pounding in her chest. "I just didn't know how to come back." For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside raged in downpour, but inside that little bookstore, time paused. And as Evelyn stepped closer, soaking wet, cheeks flushed, and unsure why her throat suddenly felt so tight, she realized something. This wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of something she hadn't even known she needed. "I came for the memories," she murmured. Noah smiled, quiet and familiar. "Then you came to the right place." Amelia Reyes lived a life measured in moments between pages. Her tiny attic apartment above the library was cluttered with stacks of worn novels, scattered notes, and dried lavender tied with string. She had grown up in a quiet part of town, raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away in a car accident when she was only 10. Her grief had taught her to find comfort in stories, and words became her sanctuary. She believed in love, not the grand, flashy kind from movies, but the subtle, lingering kind, like the warmth left in a teacup after someone's gone. Despite her gentle spirit, Amelia was determined. She was working on her debut novel, something raw and emotional. It was loosely inspired by her own life, laced with fictional touches of hope she hadn't yet experienced herself. Meanwhile, Evan Callahan had grown up surrounded by music and chaos. His mother was a piano teacher, his father a dreamer who never quite found steady ground. Evan had learned early on how to balance between hope and disappointment. When his father left when he was 16, Evan became the man of the house. He abandoned his dream of studying architecture and took over the cafe his grandfather had left behind. Though he joked often and charmed easily, those closest to him knew how he avoided questions about the future. He loved watching people fall in love across cafe tables, but never let anyone close enough to ask if he'd ever experienced it himself. Each day after their first encounter, Amelia found herself drawn back to the Clock Tower brew. She told herself it was for the cozy atmosphere or the quiet, but deep down, she knew it was for him. Their conversation started small comments about books, music, the weather. Evan would often walk over when the cafe slowed down, perching on the edge of her table with a dishcloth still in hand. He began to memorize the way she twirled her pen when thinking or bit her lip when stuck on a sentence. Amelia learned. He played piano after hours when no one was around. He learned she cried during thunderstorms not from fear, but because the sound reminded her of the night her parents didn't come home. Slowly, their stories began to weave together, shared over mugs of cinnamon coffee. Under the fairy lights that flickered above the cafe windows. One evening, Evan offered her something unusual. "You ever want to hear how a story sounds in music?" he asked, nervously scratching the back of his neck. She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Stay after closing. I'll show you." That night, when the last customer left and the chairs were flipped onto tables, Evan led her to the back of the cafe where an old upright piano stood. Its keys were yellowed, the wood scratched from years of love. He sat, took a breath, and began to play Dot. It wasn't a song she recognized, but she didn't need to. Every note felt like a sentence unspoken. He played slowly, eyes closed, and she realized this was how he told his stories. Amelia sat beside him, her heart steady, but her breath caught. When he stopped, she whispered, "That was beautiful." He looked at her, more serious than she'd ever seen him. "It's called The Night You Held My Hand. I wrote it last year, but I didn't know who it was for until now." Silence fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something neither of them had words for yet. And so, in a quiet cafe on the corner of a small town, under golden lights and surrounded by books and melodies, two souls slowly found one another, not in grand gestures, but in small, tender moments that would one day change everything. The days after that piano night unfolded like the soft turning of pages in a cherished novel. There were no confessions, no grand declarations, just the gradual pull of something real forming between Amelia and Evan. She still visited the cafe every day, but now Evan would already have her coffee ready before she ordered, the mug always, accompanied by a tiny scribble on a napkin, a quote, a song lyric, sometimes just a smiley face. And she'd smile every time. One rainy afternoon, as the sky spilled silver drops over cobblestones, Evan noticed Amelia standing just outside, hesitant to cross the street with no umbrella. Without thinking, he darted from behind the counter, pushed through the cafe door, and offered her his own, already open. "You'll get soaked," she protested. "I work better damp." He grinned. "Besides, can't have my favorite writer melting in the rain." She laughed, and in that moment, under the shared space of that little black umbrella, something shifted. The distance between them felt smaller, almost electric, the kind of silent awareness that says, "You're becoming something to me." That evening, they talked longer than usual. She told him about her novel, how it was about a woman searching for meaning and loss. He listened, genuinely, not the way most people nodded politely. He asked questions, made her think, challenged her to write not just what she knew, but what she longed for. He told her about his mother and how music was the one constant in his life. How he dreamed of designing a space that felt like home too. People who had none, like an old cafe or a library with couches and late night jazz. Their connection deepened not through the obvious things, but through those late night talks when the world was asleep. She began bringing her laptop to the cafe, and Evan would silently refill her coffee, pausing sometimes just to sit across from her. One night, as the last customer left and the lights dimmed, Evan played the piano again, but this time Amelia sat beside him, her fingers tracing the keys gently. "Teach me," she said softly. He looked at her, surprised. "You play?" "No, but maybe I'd like to learn something new. With the right teacher." He laughed, shook his head, and began to show her. Her hands were awkward at first, but he didn't mind. Their fingers brushed over the keys, lingering a little too long. Every accidental touch sparked something unspoken. And every time she glanced at him, her heart did something strange, like it was waiting for permission to believe in love again. One weekend, Evan closed the cafe early and invited Amelia to the annual lantern festival held by the lakeside. There's something magic about it, he said. People write wishes on lanterns and let them go. My mom and I do it every year. That evening, Amelia wore a soft blue sweater and had her hair loosely braided. Evan couldn't stop staring out at the lake. Music played in the background as people wrote their hopes and dreams on floating lanterns. Evan handed her a marker. "What are you wishing for?" she asked, smiling. He looked at her, quiet for a moment, then said, "For something worth staying for." Her heart stilled. She wrote hers in silence, folding the paper carefully. He peeked. "To feel whole again." He read aloud, his voice softer now. "Too cheesy?" She asked, embarrassed. "No." He replied gently, "It's honest." As they released their lanterns, standing shoulder to shoulder, their fingers brushed again, and this time, neither of them pulled away. They stood like that for minutes, watching their wishes float into the sky. Afterward, Evan took her hand, not boldly, not dramatically, just a simple gesture, but Amelia's breath caught, because it was the first time someone had reached for her like that. Not to save her, not to rescue her, but just to hold her. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't a passing connection. It was something deeper, something terrifying and beautiful and real. The days grew warmer, and so did their bond. There were walks in the park where they argued over books, late-night texts that made Amelia smile in the dark, and quiet mornings where Evan found excuses just to sit near her while she wrote. Yet underneath all the sweetness, there was tension, unspoken things, questions neither of them dared to ask yet, because love, real love, the kind that lasts, often begins not with the perfect kiss or a dramatic confession, but in the space between two hands brushing on piano keys, between laughter over spilled coffee and in stolen glances when one thinks the other isn't looking. They hadn't kissed yet. They hadn't needed to, because every second spent not saying what they felt was its own kind of beautiful agony, and both of them knew something was building, something that could break them or make them. The weeks that followed the Lantern Festival became a quiet blur of affection, growing like ivy around Amelia and Evan's lives. There was no announcement, no formal agreement, but something between them had shifted. As undeniable as the changing seasons, their connection was now a rhythm, slow and beautiful. Morning coffees had become sacred. Evan would sometimes walk Amelia home in the evenings without a word, their silences comfortable, like a shared understanding without needing to be explained. Amelia had never realized how much warmth could be found in someone's presence until Evan one afternoon. Evan found her sitting by the cafe window with a distant look in her eyes. Her laptop sat close beside her, and her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't sipped from in a while. He sat down across from her. Writer's block or heart trouble? She smiled faintly. Maybe both. He waited, giving her the silence. She needed She looked out the window and then whispered, "I didn't just move here to write. I left a life that made me forget who I was. A relationship that felt more like an apology than love." Evan's face softened. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," she said, looking back at him. "Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here with you." The air between them felt heavy with emotion. Evan reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," he said quietly, "but I know you're the best part of my today." Tears welled in her eyes, not the sad kind, but the kind that said someone finally saw her. That evening, they cooked dinner together at Evan's apartment above the cafe. It was small, cluttered, filled with music posters and warm lighting. She laughed as he nearly burned the garlic bread, and he couldn't stop watching her as she danced barefoot in his kitchen, twirling to an old record playing Billie Holiday after dinner. They sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around them, watching the city lights flicker beneath the stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. "I feel safe here," she whispered. Turned slightly, his lips brushing her forehead. "You are." They talked for hours about everything: her childhood, his dreams, their fears. Evan confessed how he'd always been the one who stayed, even when people left. And Amelia told him about her father, who taught her that love was something you earn through silence. They were two broken souls, slowly mending each other with honesty and patience. That night, as they lay on the couch under that old blanket, their hands entwined, Evan leaned in, close enough that Amelia could feel his breath against her cheek. "I want to kiss you," he murmured. "But not if you're unsure." She looked at him, eyes full of tears and something braver. "I'm sure." And when their lips met, it wasn't fireworks or dramatic music. It was gentle, tender, and devastatingly real. Like coming home after. Being lost for years, they didn't rush anything. The kiss wasn't a promise of forever, but a declaration of now. And sometimes now is the bravest kind of love. In the days that followed, Amelia started writing again. Pages poured from her, like rain on a long-awaited storm. Evan would sneak behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and whispering, "You're magic. You know that?" They began leaving little pieces of themselves in each other's routines. Amelia left bookmarks in Evan's favorite books. He started sneaking love notes in her coat pockets, but love isn't without shadows. One evening, while reorganizing boxes in her apartment, Amelia found an old envelope photos from her past life, a man she once thought she loved. Smiles that no longer felt real. And suddenly, guilt bloomed in her chest like a bruise. She hadn't told Evan everything. About how deeply that relationship had wounded her. About the part of her that still feared she'd ruined something good just by being in it. She almost didn't go to the cafe the next day. But then she saw the napkin he'd left her the morning before, now tucked in her notebook. "You're not too much. You're just enough for the right heart." And she knew running wasn't love. Staying, even when scared, was. That night, she told Evan everything. He listened, never once interrupting, his fingers threading through hers as she cried. "You're not broken, Amelia," he whispered. "You're becoming." They held each other like a lifeline, and in that quiet embrace, they found something deeper than romance acceptance. From that night onward, their relationship deepened. They weren't just falling in love. They were choosing it. Evan started writing music again, just little melodies on the piano. And Amelia's novel, it was no longer about loss. It was about rediscovery. And every chapter she wrote, and every note Evan played, there was the unspoken truth. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, holds your hand, and stays. It began with a phone call Amelia never wanted to answer. She was in the middle of rearranging the cafe's chalkboard specials when her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in nearly a year. At first, she thought it was a mistake. But when she saw the name, Liam, her heart dropped like a stone in her chest. Evan noticed the change in her immediately. She was quieter, more distracted. Her eyes wandered to her phone more than usual. When he gently asked, she said she was just tired, but the truth was heavier. Liam, the man she once thought she'd marry, was coming to town. Not for her, at least that's what he claimed, but because his new job happened to bring him nearby. And now he wanted to catch up. He had read that she moved, heard from mutual friends that she was doing well. It would be nice to talk like old times, he said, but there was nothing nice about the memories Liam brought back. Evan noticed how distant she'd become. At night, she'd curl up beside him but stare at the ceiling for hours. When he reached for her hand, she'd squeeze it, but her eyes never softened like they used to. Finally, one evening, under the soft hum of the cafe's closing hour lights, he asked Amelia, "Are you still here?" "With me?" She looked up, startled. "Of course I am. No, I mean here." He tapped his chest, "Because something's changed. And I don't know what I did, but I feel like I'm slowly losing you." She bit her lip, holding back tears. "It's not you, it's my past, showing up uninvited." He nodded quietly. "Do you want to talk about it?" I don't know how, but he didn't push. He never did. A few days later, Amelia agreed to meet Liam at a neutral place, the old library near the train station. She told herself it was closure, nothing more. She didn't tell Evan, not because she wanted to hide anything, but because she didn't know how to explain it without hurting him. The meeting was brief, awkward. Liam still had that charming smile, but it didn't reach her heart anymore. He talked about himself, about how he regretted how things ended, how maybe they were just off timing. Amelia listened, but her chest stayed still. No flutter, no ache, and that's when she knew she had truly moved on. But secrets have a way of catching up. A week later, Evan found a picture in someone's social post Amelia outside the library with a man who clearly wasn't him. Just a moment frozen in time, but the caption was enough. Old flames or new sparks. Evan didn't confront her immediately. He just retreated. His smiles were fewer. He stopped leaving her notes. And when she asked him what was wrong, he shrugged and said, "Nothing. Just busy." The silence between them grew louder until one rainy evening, Amelia walked into the cafe and found Evan alone, staring at the piano he rarely touched. "I saw the picture," he said before she could speak. Her heart dropped. "Evan, did you go back to him?" "No, I needed to end it. Properly. I didn't want to hurt you, so I didn't say anything." "But you did hurt me," he said, voice cracking. "Not because you saw him, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was scared. I didn't want you to think I still had feelings for him. I was trying to protect what we had. And in doing that," he whispered, "you built a wall between us." There was a long pause. The only sound was the rain tapping gently on the windows. "I love you, Amelia," he said, his voice barely audible. "That love needs truth, even when it's messy." She stepped forward, slowly, her voice trembling. "I love you too, Evan, and I messed up. I know that. But I didn't cross any lines. I just panicked. I've never had something this real. I didn't know how to handle the fear of losing it." He looked at her, eyes filled with pain. "Then learn with me. Don't run." She nodded through her tears. "I don't want to run. Not anymore." That night, they didn't fix everything. There were no perfect solutions or magical forgiveness, but they talked. They cried. They laid their hearts bare on the cafe floor, under the soft golden lights and the sound of rain, and in that raw, vulnerable space, something stronger than romance bloomed. Resilience. Sometimes the heart isn't tested by how it loves, but by how it stays when it's hurt. The days that followed were quieter, not because love had left, but because it was learning how to breathe again. Amelia and Evan didn't fall back into old routines overnight. The laughter didn't instantly return, nor did the easy touches or long conversations under starlit skies. But there was a softness between them now, a delicate rebuilding of trust, brick by honest brick. Each morning, Evan still opened the cafe, but now he waited a little longer for Amelia to join. She began arriving earlier again, sometimes with fresh ideas for pastries, other times just to sit beside him and hold his hand before the day began. "I made a choice." "Evan," she whispered one morning, watching steam rise from their coffee mugs. Not to leave anything unsaid anymore. He nodded, and I promised to ask, not assume. That small pact, spoken over morning silence, became their foundation. They started taking evening walks again, sometimes retracing the steps of that night she had followed him after their first meeting. It wasn't about recreating memories, but reclaiming them. They sat by the old bookstore and talked about what scared them. Evan opened up about the years he spent feeling not enough for his family, for love, for anyone. Amelia shared how much guilt she carried from letting people walk all over her in the past. One night, he gently reached for her hand. You know what the hardest thing for me was? She turned toward him. It wasn't the picture. It was wondering if, when things got messy, you'd run again. I didn't want to be someone who gets left behind. Her grip on his hand tightened. You won't be. Not now. Not ever. In the weeks that followed, small gestures spoke the loudest. Amelia framed a picture of them on the cafe wall, the one Evan had taken secretly on their first beach walk. She titled it, Where It Began. Evan began playing the piano again during slow afternoons, and every time he did, Amelia would close her eyes and listen like it was the first time she'd heard music. One weekend, Evan took her to his hometown. It was a small, sleepy place with streets filled with childhood memories and old regrets. He showed her his father's empty workshop, where broken clocks and dusty journals still sat untouched. Amelia held his hand the whole time. It's like, time stopped here, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Yeah, and for a long time I let it. They stood there in the quiet until Evan whispered, but now I want to start moving forward. Amelia looked up at him, eyes shining. Let's do it together. They returned to the city with something new between them, not just love, but a quiet certainty. They had faced a storm and chosen not to walk away. They had learned that real love isn't just the warmth of good days, it's standing side by side. When the skies darkened up, Evan surprised Amelia a few days later with a small, delicate bracelet. It wasn't flashy or expensive, just a simple silver chain with a charm shaped like a tiny hand. For the night you held mine, he said, slipping it on her wrist. And for every night after, Amelia laughed through tears. You're the best mistake I never saw coming. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. And you're the best truth I've ever told. That night, they sat on the rooftop, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Do you ever wonder, Amelia asked softly, what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? Evan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then, I think my heart would still be asleep. She leaned into him. Good thing I woke it up then. He kissed her forehead. And I'll never let it close again. The past was still part of them, but it no longer defined them. They had found something rare, a love that stayed. The sun was just beginning to rise when Amelia stood at the edge of the lake, her arms wrapped in a soft cream shawl, the breeze lifting her hair as the water glimmered. Gold. Behind her, the world was waking up, but in her heart, everything was already alive. Evan walked up slowly, carrying 2 cups of coffee just the way she liked it. He stood beside her silently, letting the moment speak. I still remember the first morning you made me coffee, she said, taking a sip. You said it was too bitter. He teased, bumping her shoulder lightly. And you said I was too sweet. For it. They laughed together, a sound that felt like home. Peaceful, unforced. Steady. Evan turned to face her, the quiet of the morning wrapping around them like a promise. Do you ever think about what comes next? Amelia nodded slowly. All the time. And, he asked, I want 1,000 more nights of holding your hand, she whispered. A life of small mornings, slow coffees, shared silences, and never letting go again. He reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling slightly, heart pounding. Like the first time he had kissed her in the rain, I've been carrying this, he said, pulling out a simple velvet box. Not because I needed the perfect moment, but because any moment with you is perfect. He opened it. Inside was a delicate silver ring, etched with tiny stars that mirrored the ones they used to lie under. Marry me, Amelia. She blinked, the world going still for a heartbeat. Her hands covered her mouth, emotion brimming in her eyes. Are you serious? I want mornings like this for the rest of my life. I want to build a home with you, one that's filled with warmth and laughter and maybe some burned toast because I still can't cook. She laughed through tears. You're ridiculous. But I'm yours. He stepped closer. Will you be mine? She threw her arms around him, her answer whispered against his ear, always. The cafe became more than a business, it became a story in itself. Locals loved to visit not just for the pastries or the coffee, but for the way Evan and Amelia made the space feel like love had moved in and never left. Photos of their journey lined one wall, little snapshots of laughter, milestones, handwritten quotes framed between them. One said, "Love isn't what finds you in the good times. It's what holds you steady through the storms." Their wedding was small, intimate. Not fancy, not grand, but deeply them. She wore a soft white gown with sleeves that fluttered in the wind. He wore a slate gray suit and nerves that vanished the second she walked toward him. Vows were exchanged beneath a blooming cherry tree. And when Amelia said, "The night you held my hand, I never let go," not a single person remained. Dry-eyed Dot, they didn't go far for their honeymoon, just a quiet cabin near the sea. They spent days writing poems in the sand, watching sunsets, and dancing to music only they could hear. Dot, it wasn't perfect. There were days when work got stressful, when disagreements happened, when exhaustion crept in, but now they had tools, patience, communication, and the sacred decision to stay. Amelia published her first book a year later, a collection of essays and short stories about love, growth, and the power of holding on. The dedication read, "For Evan, who taught me that love doesn't just arrive, it returns." Evan expanded the cafe into a creative space, hosting open mics and poetry nights where people shared their hearts and stories. It became a hub of healing and hope. Dot. They took their love around the world, sometimes through travel, sometimes through handwritten letters left in cafes and other cities. Wherever they went, they carried each other like a favorite song. Years later, on a cool autumn evening, they sat on a park bench as the leaves fell around them. A little girl, their daughter, tugged Evan's hand. "Papa," she asked, "how did you and Mama fall in love?" He smiled and looked at Amelia. "Well," he said, "once upon a time your mama walked into my cafe and into my life." And then what? Evan took Amelia's hand the same way he did that night so long ago. "And then," he whispered, "she held my hand and never let go."